the show for buyer's remorse.
Welcome back to the Terry Gilbert Show and a special edition now of helping Boston be Boston strong. You've heard that term, be Boston strong. Boston strong. Well, I'm happy to tell you that we're doing our part right now in this next segment or two with a living master artist from the Valley. He is in the studio with us. I'm delighted to tell you. His name is Ed Copley. You might recognize that name, Copley, from Boston, as in Boston's Copley Square. Copley Square is named after John Singleton Copley. Yes, you historians and art historians and people who know U.S. history, the famous master artist whose works hang in the Boston Museum, among other places. There's also a John Singleton Copley in Los Angeles at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. Ed Copley is my guest tonight, and he is a living master artist, and incidentally, he is the great-great-great-grandson of the iconic artist John Singleton Copley. So it runs in the family, which is very unusual, I think, today. But anyway, we can get into that. Now, I've seen Ed's work, and I can tell you that he is an extraordinary talent, and his work is right up there with the great masters, because why? He has become a master himself because he has studied the masters. I know, that's easy to say, harder to do, I know, okay. He has decided to lend a hand, in fact, an artistic hand, to paint a replica of a very famous painting called Watson and the Shark. Remember that painting? It was painted by his great-great-great-grandfather, John Singleton Copley, back in 1778. Now, you probably learned a little bit about this in your history classes, your art history classes, maybe some U.S. history classes. The painting is in oil, and it depicts the rescue by sailors who are in a little small boat, the rescue of a character, Brook Watson, who's trying to swim away from a shark who is attacking him in Havana, Cuba. Does this come to mind, listeners? This is a real story, too. It actually happened. There was a real shark attack that happened in Havana Harbor in 1749. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Because this character, Brook Watson, who at the time was a 14-year-old kid, had been swimming in the harbor. He was first attacked by the shark, who tore off his left foot. And screaming for his life, he is finally saved by these sailors, one who had a harpoon and attacked the shark and pulled the boy into the boat. The painting depicts the sailors' third attempt to get him rescued, and there's a good ending to the story. The boy lives, he goes on, he becomes a successful politician and businessman in London, and he meets John Singleton Copley. And he asked John Singleton, would you be interested in commissioning, if I paid you, a painting of this event in my life? And he does. Now, when I heard that a living master artist is in the Valley, whose name is Ed Copley, I invited Ed into the studio because I'm interested in why he's interested in painting this portrait again, this scene again, just like his great-grandfather had done, not once, not twice, but a number of times, about 3 times, I believe. And why? Why would he want to do this? Here's the thread. Here's the connect the dots. He wants to do this because this painting, and I love this, I just love this, this painting that shows a rescue, that shows there's hope after you lose a limb, is what he wants to manifest to all of the people who survived the terrible Boston bombing, who, like the boy in the water, were going about their thing, going merrily, doing a physical exercise like the boy in the water swimming. Those runners were running, and one minute they have feet, and the next minute they're blown to bits. Limbs are off, bloodshed everywhere. And who's the shark here? Who's the shark? Terrorists are the shark. And they're deceitful, and they fled the scene, and they manifested in pressure cooker bombs. Ed, it's delightful to have you on the program. I'm just so happy. Let's talk about this theme. This is a wonderful theme, and I'm just so thrilled that you're here. Welcome to the Terry Gilbert Show.
Thank you, Terry, for having me on this evening. When I first heard about the Boston bombing, I was in my studio working on a painting. I couldn't believe it. My thoughts were, what is our world coming to? And after seeing all of the images on TV, my heart went out to the victims. And with my family history and connection to the Copley Square, I asked myself, what could I do as an artist to help these poor people? How can I, as an artist, help raise funds for the survivors? Then came the idea to make a replica of my great-great-great-grandfather, John Singleton Copley's painting of Watson and Sark, which you just mentioned, which hangs in the Boston Museum of Art. Also, the painting that was commissioned by Brook Watson hangs at the National Gallery in D.C. He made a second copy, which now hangs in the
Your
Boston...
great-great-great-grandfather did.
Yes. Hangs,
so do I have this right? There's 3 copies, but the first one hangs in the National Gallery in Washington,
D.C. In D.C., that's correct.
And it's gigantic. It's huge, isn't it?
It's 70 and a half inches by 90 and 3/4
That's big.
inches.
Yeah. That's big.
So what I decided to do to keep the proper proportions of the painting, I scaled mine down to a size of 48 by 60 inches.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to make it the same size as the original because we want to be able to auction this off, and if someone buys it for their home, that would be too big of a scale.
Now that's the piece that I want to get to. So first you have this theme of the shark attack and how it relates to the attack for the Boston. I love this theme, and it works so beautifully. But the whole MO about this, Ed, is that you eventually, when you finish the painting, want to auction it off, and it's my understanding all proceeds go to the victims.
Correct.
Now you're a living master artist, so you're apt to get a pretty penny for this.
We hope to get enough publicity and advertising to get before we get to the auction to bring this price up.
And so tell us, when do you think the auction will be? Are you that far thinking yet, or not?
We are at this point. I've spent the last 2 months doing my color underpainting. I have that complete at this point in time. My next step is to go to Washington, D.C., see the first original, and then from there I'll be going to Boston to see the other copy that he had in his studio.
So let me get this straight. As an artist, you started here in the Valley. Then you take your work with you.
I will not be taking my work with me. I'll be taking photographs and making notations for color corrections, detail, and things like that.
All right, and then you go to Washington in the National Gallery and you study your great-great-grandfather's work.
Right, and I'll make photographs there for further detail and things like that.
Because back in my art history days, I remember when I studied some art history in college of the Renaissance and so forth, many students would go into the galleries and before they got to be a master, they would study the Mona Lisa and they would paint her, or they would study whomever. But you don't do that anymore. That's not done anymore with modern artists.
And I wish it was, because I feel that artists of today are losing out so much. If they would go back and copy some of the old master works, it's more of a challenge to match and copy an old painting than creating a new one, because you have to match all of the composition, the colors, everything. And I think it's a great learning tool, and I wish schools would teach that again today.
All right, I have one quick question before we have a break. We got about a minute before we take our first break. When I started studying up on this painting, because I remembered it, but I didn't go in to really look at it. And then I started, in preparation for me meeting you and so forth, looking at all of the gory details of this painting. Well, the gory details of the attack on Brook Watson's leg aren't depicted with blood all over the place and you can't really see the foot. It's very, very, very subtle. And there's traces of blood in the water, so there's a lot that's obscured, I think. And that reminds me of how it was so obscured in Boston. They're going their merry way, and all of a sudden chaos. And I remember some of those first responders talked on national television about how they would, and this sounds a little gory, but they were very open about discussing it. They found a limb here, a foot there, a hand here, as they were dragging bodies into the ambulance. I think that the connection between this painting and this event is astonishing and quite a link.
I agree. And that's why I chose this piece, because there's a great history behind the painting itself. It's so compelling that I felt it would be very appropriate to do this piece as a fundraiser because it tells a great story about how Brook Watson overcame his disabilities and triumphed over adversity. I mean, it's a great piece.
That's the other part of the theme.
Right.
Let's take a quick break here on the Terry Gilbert Show with living master artist Ed Copley and the great-great-great-grandson of the deceased master artist that we all know, John Singleton Copley. It's so great to meet you right here in the studio. I'll be right back at 602-260-KFYI, Fox News Radio 550 KFYI, the Valley's talk station. It's the Terry Gilbert Show, Saturday night edition. I'm just so pleased to meet you in person, Ed Copley, living master artist. That's quite a title, because to be a master, you really have to spend a whole career at it, and you're living and still producing great works. I've seen some of your stuff. It's right up there with your great-great-great-grandfather and others. To run in the family, that's kind of unusual these days, isn't it?
Quite unusual. Doesn't happen to too many people, I tell you.
Okay,
But,
let me get back to,
okay.
and congratulations on it too. Let me get back to talking about the painting and how this relates to Boston, because I want to talk a little bit also with you in the limited time that we have about the auction and the sponsorship of the auction and so forth, which will probably be, if I'm not incorrect, the first anniversary of the Boston bombing. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right,
yes.
let me get back to another theme that I noticed when I was looking at this painting. Brook Watson, Ed, is naked in the painting, or that's the appearance anyway. So he's swimming in Havana Harbor. He's naked, and my mind is saying, well, maybe the shark ate his clothes first, or maybe oh no, I don't know what the backstory on that is. But while we're on this theme, it reminds me of the runners being naked. Now, I don't mean per se. I mean they have little clothing on, and so rhetorically, they're running naked to what is about ready to happen. Now, are you prepared, or is this part of your work, to speak with some of the survivors and to get their passionate reaction? Because I know artists study not just the work, but they study on a level to bring their own emotion through that paintbrush.
Right.
Are you going to be talking with any of these runners who 1 minute they're running and have legs, the next minute they don't have legs and limbs?
We plan on doing that once I get back to the Boston Museum. We're going to bring in some of the survivors and interview them and get their thoughts and feelings. And also, I want their thoughts and feelings on the painting also.
Now, do you need to do that to get the passion to come through your fingers, into your head and through your fingers? You know, artists always talk about whether you're a ballet dancer, a singer, a method actor. In my work, which is artistic, even though I do news and commentary, I still go and I talk to people involved in current events. Right. Do you need to do that?
I don't need to do it at this point in time. I hope to accomplish all of that when we do the auction back at the Boston.
All right, let's dovetail into that and talk about that. Okay. Auction is set for the first anniversary.
Correct.
It's sponsored by the real estate giant Keller Williams, which I want to give hats off to Keller Williams for being the main sponsor of this. In fact, I think the only sponsor, right?
Correct, the only
sponsor.
All right,
and they're sponsoring your cost for the painting. They're putting up the auction. The auction will be in Copley Square. Will it be in the Boston Museum, or will it be outside? Sort of akin to how the Boston Marathon was outside.
It will be inside the Boston Museum. Plus, we'll probably have it over to Keller Williams' office there because they're located on Copley Square also. And we may preview it there and then take it over to the museum. And I plan on signing the painting at the museum. I'll complete everything up to that point. Also, I wanted to mention that I'll be hand carving a frame for that painting because I want a frame for that period of time of the 1700s.
Okay, now I suppose this will be huge advertisement in Boston. Do they already know that this is the plan so far? And then they'll bring all the people that go to auctions to raise the most money. It'll be quite the wine and cheese party, I would imagine.
We'll be talking to a lot of people, and we'll be talking to Sotheby's auction also.
Are you going to be talking to the art people in New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco and so forth?
We will reach out to all of them, believe me.
And then do you think a private owner will finally own this because it's going to go to the highest bidder? Or are you talking about perhaps a corporation might own it, or even funds from the Boston Museum they put up to buy this and donate it?
I have no idea who will purchase the piece.
Are you excited about doing this?
I'm very excited about doing this.
Tell me a little bit about how laborious something like this is, because after all, you've got to have a work akin to your great-great-great-grandfather, John Singleton Copley.
Right.
No pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure.
But it's a great challenge. I love it, and I think it's going to be great.
Tell me a little bit about the relationship between your great-great-grandfather and Brook Watson. They became friends because of that instance. And by the way, I've learned in my own research about this, that event, that shark event, that actual current event back in the 1700s that happened in Havana Bay, that was the first recorded shark event ever.
This is true.
And so your grandfather also goes down in history working with this survivor in making a painting that manifests this current event.
Also, I'd like to point out, too, it was a major piece also because of the African American in the boat. That was the first of its time.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. Is he the man with the harpoon that's
No.
ready to stab the shark?
He's the one standing in the center of the boat with the rope going out to Watson. He's more or less the main character, and then the fellow with the harpoon is the second character because of the composition.
It's a beautiful painting. And like I said, no pressure.
No.
But I've seen your work, and you're meticulous.
Yeah.
You're an absolute extraordinary talent.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about your quest to become a master artist. At some point in your life, probably in your youth, maybe middle school, maybe high school, maybe college, you said, this runs in the family, it's in my blood. But nonetheless, you had to put a lot of hours in learning your craft.
It's something I didn't think about. I've put in many, many years. I've been painting since I was 14 years old. So I feel I've paid my dues, and I'm to the point where I'm happy where I'm at.
Well, indeed, and I'm happy where you're at right now on KFYI. In the couple of minutes, and go ahead and elaborate on this, in the couple of minutes that we have left, what is involved in being a living master artist? When people say master, you kind of think of the Rembrandts, and they're long dead. You think of a Singleton Copley. Do people come to you and say, can you paint my daughter? I'll pay you any. How does that all work? I mean, you're living, breathing, and you're already at this notoriety. You're like an Olympian at your level of business.
I do get a lot of commissions at different points in time, but I think the big factor is the way I do my work. I work like the old masters. I make my paints from pigments right on up. I make my own recipes. I make my own mediums. And most of the artists today don't want to take that time and effort to put
You
in
mean to
doing a
tell
piece.
me you use raw eggs in your oil paints?
Yes, I do.
You really do? I remember that from my own art history.
I do a process called prosciutto, where I use the raw egg yolk.
That's an old
and-
Italian word. You probably learned that from Renaissance art.
Yes, and prosciutto means stinky poo because of the egg yolk.
Yeah, but that's the medium, the sticky medium
Right.
that helps adhere that oil, right?
And what's nice, using that process, I can do a crossover from water-based to oil-based by the amount of egg yolk that I put into the paint.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Do some of the survivors know you've taken on this project yet?
No, not yet.
So Boston media doesn't know this yet.
No, not yet.
Oh well, I'm happy to break it here in Phoenix.
You have the exclusive on this,
Well,
Terry.
that's wonderful. Now, after this interview and so forth, when you go about your day, you'll go on and spend how many hours a day just prepping yourself before you fly back to Boston, talk to the Keller Williams people, go into the Boston Museum, and do some of the secretarial work you need to before finishing this masterpiece?
This will all take place in the next 3 weeks.
In the next 3 weeks.
Right. Because I have the
So-
painting to the point now I need to go see the original to get the details and the information I need for color balance. And then I can come back and finish the painting itself.
It's such a noble thing. I just love all the themes. You're using your own hands, a phalange, obviously, that you have. Other people not so lucky because of these terrorists. The theme of the terrorist by way of the deceit inside of the pressure cooker, just leaving it there and leaving. And then, of course, thank goodness through the FBI and the Boston Police and Sheriff's Department and everything, they did find the brothers and so forth. But these men come from cells in the United States, and they are like sharks. You don't know where they are. They're swimming around. I just love the theme here, and I love the altruism and the generosity of heart and spirit in in what you are manifesting on this canvas, and of course, because of your name, the Copley name. May it live a long, long time through your work, and may all the proceeds first go very, very, very high. So if anybody here in this listening audience wants to reach you and say, hey, here's a couple of mil right now, how can they find you?
Okay, they can go to my website, which is EdCopleyFineArt.com.
EdCopley, EdCopley, fine art, one long word?
Well, all along one word.
Fineart.com.
Right.
Again, I applaud you for this effort, and I'm delighted to finally have met you here on the Terry Gilbert Show. Please keep in touch with us and all the listeners of the show.
Most definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, our